the job that I have today is very different than a job I'll have in a year. I'm almost kind of preparing for that job, which will be kind of more like my old job in the sense of, you hit scale, you're handling claims, you're posting reserves, you're elevating things. But now it's just such a special and unique time because you're building out the systems, you're talking about things, you're trying to develop like the best practices and how we're going to like interact and do business. And it's a really cool time, and we're able to kind of support our underwriters and kind of getting things off the ground and building their relationships with brokers and showing that we're here to kind of support the products.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. I'm your host, Meghan Henry, and today I am running solo without a co-host, but I am joined by Ari Magdadoff, and I'm super excited to have him. Ari is the Senior Vice President at Westfield Specialty, which is a kind of a newer startup insurance company that is a subsidiary of Westfield Insurance. And he's here to talk about his career and he's a lawyer. He practiced for some time and then moved into the insurance industry and now is on this new adventure and has a lot to say about it, and it's super exciting. So let's bring him in. Good morning, Ari. Welcome to the Defense Never Rests. How are you today?
Morning. Very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you as well. You and I had talked. I think we talked it was in October. I think it's been a while since we chatted. We've had this kind of in the yes. And spoiler alert for anyone, we're recording this on Groundhog Day, so I guess we're in for more winter if you believe in that groundhog.
We were talking about that on my driving my kids to school today, and we didn't know if he saw his shadow or not. And then we were trying to figure out what was it. If he saw a shadow, we have more like winter, or do we get earlier? We couldn't figure it out, and we didn't have time to look it up.
And we really haven't had much of a winter in the Northeast that much anyway. It's been New York, upstate New York has gotten the brunt of the winter this year.
Yeah, I think I cursed our winters when I paid to have my snowblower cleaned up last year and ready to go, and then it pretty much hasn't snowed since. So
yeah, that is the problem. Yeah, it's either if you get it fixed or you buy one, then you're good for 5 years. You're not going to use that.
Yep.
Well, we're not here to talk about the weather, although you'd be surprised how often we end up talking about the weather on this programming. Lucky for all our listeners that we continually always talk about the weather. But we're here to talk about you and what you do, and your kind of how you got to where you are. And I have a lot of lawyers on this podcast, and everyone has a different path and different reason why they went to law school, or and why they decided to go to law school. So I'm curious, what your path was. Was it something that you had planned to do, or you kind of fell into doing like me? I just knew there was nothing else I could do with my college degree, so I had to find something else to do. But I'm curious to hear what your path was.
Yeah, I mean, if you went back to when I was really young, I wanted to be a plastic surgeon, a doctor. That was like what I wanted to do. I went to University of Miami for my undergrad. And I actually worked at it's called the faculty club, and, various school organizations had, they would rent it out for events. So there'd be a weekly, doctors group and a weekly lawyers group. And I was just one of the servers there. So you set up, clean up. And over those, the year that I worked there, I just found that I got along with the lawyer group a lot better than the doctor group. And at the time I was kind of pre-med microbiology major in my first year. And I kind of woke up starting my sophomore year saying, gee, you know what? I think I'd rather be a lawyer than a doctor. And I switched my major to political science and history. I double majored and kind of went on my way. And my kind of journey heading into law school, I love technology. I liked my second job after the faculty club at the University of Miami was working at their technology product center, and I got to like put computers together and order them for people and kind of do all this stuff. And I was like, you know what? It's like 1997, 1998. Tech is hot. The internet is kind of blossoming. Gee, I really want to do high tech law. Like that would be like the goal. And at the time, I was looking at law schools on the West Coast, and it was really between like Santa Clara in Silicon Valley and Seattle University in Seattle, which were like the two like hotspots for tech. And that's how I ended up in law school there. And then, as everyone knows, comes late 99, 2000, the dot-com burst, or dot-com bubble bursts, and you know, all your, you know, best laid plans are now gone awry. So I had to kind of regroup and figure out what I wanted to do. But once you have that kind of law degree, you know, sky's the limit, right?
Yeah. And a lot of pivoting happens too. I mean, I graduated during the real estate crash, and I had gone in being like, oh, I want to do commercial real estate, you know, transactional work, and that clearly was not happening. So there was no jobs to be had there, so I ended up in litigation. So you know, how did you pivot once you're in law school? Like, was it when you graduated, you're like, okay, let's take the jobs I can get, or, you know, how did you approach it?
Yeah, so I mean, interesting, right? Like when you get into law school, there's no like, hi, I want to be a high tech lawyer. Like here's the course curriculum. What happened was I realized very quickly that most lawyers who were involved in like tech were patent lawyers, and you had to have like a really like a science degree background. So it's kind of like, okay, maybe that's not going to work, right? There's no like, there isn't a way to do it without having that type of degree, unless you're going to go into corporate law and just advise companies that happen to be tech companies. And so I just started focusing my like elective coursework on like stuff like corporate governance, other business law like classes. And I found that, you know, I was really enjoying it. And at the time, you know, Delta Airlines, I was flying back and forth between Florida and Seattle a lot. And I was flying Delta a lot, and they had a, like they were going through like the pains that airlines went through in the late 90s, and they were changing their Sky Miles program. And I started thinking, I'm like, and there were all these, you know, these best customers who were feeling kind of disenfranchised by these changes. Change is hard, and they didn't like what was happening. And I ended up thinking about it. I'm like, wow, by disenfranchising these, like this core group of customers that spend the most money on this airline, that really are the kind of bread and butter of how they make money, are they like disenfranchising these people at the expense of their shareholders? And is there like a potential, you know, like some type of like governance issue that comes out of that? Like, are you making decisions that are going to like have a negative impact on the company and the bottom line? And are the, you know, is the board making decisions that are sound for the company by impacting the frequent flyer program so much? So I wrote an article that was like in CCH Issues in Aviation Law on this issue. And I was kind of like really enjoying corporate governance and securities and kind of all those different things. So I think I left law school thinking, hey, would love to do, you know, something in this realm around securities, around corporate governance, around kind of risk management. And so that's kind of how I got to like that next step. Which was a kind of odd way to get there, but that was But when I left law school, it was 2003, and it was like almost like the age of like massive corporate frauds, right? You had MCI WorldCom, you had Enron, you had like you had I think I'm trying to think of the other ones. I think I worked on all of them in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I think
out of law
the
school.
Lehman Brothers like meltdown was then too, like there was so much.
Yeah, Lehman came like a few years later. I think it was just, there was someone doing something bad somewhere at the expense of someone else, and it was on a large scale, and it created a lot of job opportunity for young lawyers, but it was very like tedious and mind-numbing work.
The things that you don't realize going in, like the overarching theme of it is exciting, like, but the work that you need to do to make it happen, I mean, someone has to do the tedious work, and that's just no one talks about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as a young lawyer, you're, whatever they can find, you're reviewing documents, you're tagging things, you're attending depositions and writing deposition summaries for like partners, later in the day, to read, and there's a lot of grunt work. I found like my first couple years out doing that, and you never felt like you weren't writing, like you were writing, but you're just writing summaries, you're writing reports, you're maybe doing little research projects here and there. But on these like kind of mega cases, there was just very little legal work there. I wasn't going to court, I was going to depositions, but it just felt very like not what you went to law school to do.
Yeah.
And I did that for a couple of years, and then I went to a much smaller firm from where I had been to really kind of branch out and go to court and write briefs and kind of like hone my craft, I guess, so to say. And that happened to be an insurance defense firm, which also had an insurance coverage group. So I was kind of working in both, and starting to learn insurance and like the work that I do now.
And so was that part, at least I found when I came out and got a real job in law school, the insurance defense, like I didn't know what that meant to me, and until I actually started doing the work. And so I didn't completely understand at the time how much insurance is behind pretty much everything until I started doing the work. So was that eye-opening to you, being like, oh man, like there's this whole machine kind of behind this that like it didn't even occur to me that really existed. In my mind, insurance was just something you had on your car, or you had home insurance, homeowners insurance, but I didn't understand how grand it was.
No, I mean, sometimes you think that like almost like the insurance industry funds the legal industry in some form or fashion, or a good portion of it, especially litigation. When I was working on Enron and my original job and dealing with that mess, I like any other young attorney, I'd come in, I'd bill your 9, 10, 12 hours a day, whatever it was. You go home, and I think after the fact, I realized that our client at the time was probably seeking insurance coverage for that, and there was probably an insurance carrier paying all those bills. And no one talks about it, right? They talk about the client, but I'm sure that there was insurance, or they were trying to seek insurance for that. And I think so many litigations have this like kind of tie to insurance. You think of so many securities litigation, securities class actions, all those companies buy insurance to protect the interests of both the entity and their directors and officers in those situations. and I'm not sure. I know the partners who work on those matters understand the insurance, but I think when you're a young attorney, you just have no idea. And like you said, insurance is health, insurance is car, insurance is probably, if you're living in New York, renters, not homeowners. Um, and that's it. And I think it's as you grow in the legal world, you start to realize this kind of symbiotic relationship between litigation and insurance and our insureds, and there's this, it's a massive business, and there's a lot going on there, and I don't even think law school really touches on the relationship that much, and they may not understand it or appreciate it because they're not involved in it.
I know, but sometimes I think it should be like the practical side of practice, I feel like should be more prevalent in law school. In some law schools, I think it is. I think some of the law schools that have the co-op type programs that, they split up the years and you get more hands-on experience. But I do feel like they, as a whole, there probably needs to be a little, maybe adding some more of that practical aspect of it. So, you don't have all these lawyers come out a little green-eyed that don't understand how all the business works. Now, of course, you're not going to come out knowing everything, but I mean, I would have appreciated being a little more knowledgeable about how the litigation, at least the litigation insurance world works before I started working in it. Like maybe it would have helped me, I think, at least in that first year or two.
Well, and I think even for like looking for work as a young lawyer, there are so many opportunities for young lawyers at these insurance defense firms, and they're great places to go and get like real world experience as a lawyer. They're not as, they don't operate like a big like white shoe firm where they're like, okay, you're going to be a summer associate and then you're going to be a 1L, and or not 1L, you're first year in at the law firm, and do these like, and maybe it's not to your fourth or fifth year that you kind of get to go do real legal work. Whereas at these insurance defense firms, I remember my first day at the firm that I was at, after I had started there, and this must have been my third or fourth year as a lawyer. And one of the more senior associates at the time was like, hey, I need you to cover a calendar call for me in Brooklyn. and don't worry, the judge won't make you argue. You just need to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, cool, put on the suit the next day. And it was literally my second day of work there. And figure out, I'm like, okay, I'm in Hoboken. How am I going to get to Brooklyn and leave my house at like 5:30 a.m. so I can
go to
take the path into like New York and figure out what train I need to take to Brooklyn. And I get there and I get to the courthouse, go through security. I'm like, where do I go? Like, what do I do? How do I do that? Like, what do I, like, I don't understand. Like, there's no instruction booklet. There's no one working there who's going to tell you how to do anything.
Right.
And
well, and not to interrupt, but in New York, in the boroughs, that's its own animal. Like, I mean, there needs to be an instruction book on how to handle a call, like a calendar call in New York, because there's different floors. There's notes on, like, there's the sheets on the wall that you need to go find.
Well, and so like I knew enough. I'm like, okay, what judge is on this? But then I go to their courtroom and there's no one in there because they're doing the calendar calls and some like, it's like a cattle call. It's like, it's this big room, and I think there was a lawyer who was there who's one of those kind of per diem guys. He just appears for folks who can't make calendar calls, and that's kind of how he makes his living. And he saw me kind of confusingly looking. I'm looking on those papers like that are stapled to the door of the courtroom, trying to figure out what's happening. And he's like, come with me, and then you go and you sit in this room and you literally wait for like 2.5 hours for them to eventually call your thing and your case, and you just say blah blah blah, and the judge is like, okay, next, like, and and then off you go back to the firm. But I mean, for me, it was cool to, as I'd done the deposition things, I felt like I was a lawyer,
Mhm.
but now I really felt like a lawyer. Like I went to court, I did something, and I was kind of excited to be doing more at the time. And
Yeah.
I think insurance defense allows young lawyers to have those experiences.
Oh, it certainly does. And I've had this discussion with so many people. Like when you see like the big firms like release their like up their new first year salaries, and these first years are making like boatloads of money straight out of law school. And like I've joked with people being like, man, like if you get a second or third year associate from a mid to small insurance defense firm and throw them in there, they will know how to do the work more than these first years who are getting paid who knows what. And are, they're much more equipped to actually do, at least for litigation. But that's not the type of litigation that these large firms are obviously doing. But I often think the model is a little confusing because like when you have your boots on the ground and you're in the courtroom, you're doing the arguments very like right off the bat, and that's experience that cannot be matched. And a lot of it too is learning on your feet. I mean, that I remember I had a very similar experience going into what we in Philadelphia, it's discovery court, but I used to call it kindergarten court because that's essentially what it is. And it is very similar to New York, and you just get thrown in there, and but you
Mhm.
learn a lot. I remember being so nervous the first time, but then when you're listening to all the other people make arguments, you're like, oh, all right, like I think I know what I'm doing too. Like these, because you go in, you think all these people are smarter than you too, and you go and you're like, yeah, no, I think I got this. Like I like we're all in the same boat here. And
And then
go ahead.
it's not like TV, right? Like you envision this like very formal, you're in a courtroom, and even when you go to like a trial, um, it has these stops and starts,
Yeah.
and everyone's kind of like doing their thing, and it doesn't have the drama, right? That the television drama of being a lawyer or being in court. It's just very like functional and technical and
Yeah.
stuff like that when you're actually there. And and for some folks, I mean, I think by like 6 months into that job, it's like you had it down, and it made, I would, my practice at the time is, gee, my mornings were like spent dealing with insurance defense work in court, and then my afternoons were spent kind of dealing with coverage
Yeah.
and doing insurance coverage, and it was like a nice balance between the two.
That's a really good balance to have because you get a really good understanding like of what's behind it all. And just
Mhm.
there, I mean, there's a lot of critical thought that goes into insurance defense work and working up a case and working on your defenses. But I mean, in coverage, I think the critical thinking is to a whole other level, and your writing has to be to a whole nother level. At least that's my personal opinion about it. I think you just have to really dive in with coverage, and I think that really bolsters your ability to do the other side. So I think that's probably was a perfect combination for you.
Yeah, it like that year at that firm, that had kind of that, working on those two. It was a good experience. Just I was getting the necessary litigation experience to understand what's happening. Like when you start working insurance coverage, like you need to understand the litigation in order to know the inflection points and maybe when to try to settle, or what's what. And when you're talking to your business partners, being able to explain to them what's happening in the underlying litigation, and it kind of sets you up for success in trying to resolve those matters. When you
Yeah.
don't have that litigation background, you really need to take the time to teach it to yourself, because I think it'll make you a better coverage attorney to know what's going on, in the matters that you're dealing with, because it's so critical in terms of how to drive them to a positive and successful resolution,
Yeah.
and to know what you're heading towards at like any given moment in time.
Yeah. But also, and that to segue that forward, though, I think having that especially that coverage background probably really helped you when you moved over to go in-house.
Yeah. So I worked at that firm for about a year. That was a mixture of defense and coverage, and they ended up closing their New York City office and kind of consolidating on Long Island. And I was like, gee, I don't want to really commute from New Jersey to Long Island. Sounds pretty miserable.
You would spend
Like
most of your time
large
on a
city
train.
in between you. Like it's like no one wants to go through Manhattan to get to work.
And like,
So
did you really want to move to Long Island? I don't know. Like,
yeah,
it's very expensive too.
we were living in Hoboken at the time, and I think we had more eyes set heading into New Jersey out where I am now versus going to Long Island. But around the time that firm was closing their New York City office, another coverage firm that was more coverage and less defense. I think they did litigation around. They did make a little bit of insurance defense, but they recruited me to do really coverage. Had reached out, and I went to that firm for about 3.5, 4 years, and really learned what I needed to know in terms of writing, in terms of understanding the insurance carriers, and it really kind of gave me the foundation that I needed to go in-house. I want to say around 2010 is when I made the jump from private practice to in-house at a carrier in their claims organization. And it's kind of funny because you go from, oh, okay, I'm on a senior associate track. Could I be up for partner? Could I not? To okay, now you're a claims specialist and you're back at like the bottom of the totem pole, and
It's got to be hard.
I think a tough pill for people to swallow.
Yeah, it is. But then, I mean, you also have to like reach in and understand, like, well, it's tough to be down at the bottom, but like, there's so much room to grow, as you now know where you are now. You just have to kind of take it as it comes and be okay with, not being at the top of or close to the top of the pecking order, and just work your way up.
Yeah, and I think that there's just so much you have to learn. Like you have to learn how to interact with your underwriters and your business partners, and how to interact with brokers, and how to interact internally with the other claims folks and the people above you, and how to elevate things. I see you're getting your glare.
It's like side note, I need like an electric shade. Like I need like a remote for my shade, I think.
Yeah. It was just like you had the light come in, shine in on you. Like the clouds.
Like someone's reaching up from above trying to take me.
Exactly. So I think that I found that having that coverage background at the firm was great for coming in internally and gave me at least the foundation I needed. But I agree. I mean, you really got to start at the bottom in the insurance world to understand it and understand how it all kind of pieces together, and how to interact with folks. And then you can kind of start your kind of way up. And you're absolutely right. There's so many opportunities to grow at most carriers, both internally within your carrier, or to then leverage that and go to another carrier for opportunities if you eventually start hitting a ceiling where you're at.
Yeah. So you were with that carrier for over 10 years, and you kind of worked your way up and through, right?
Yeah. So I started there in 2010, and I was there till 2022, which was last year. So yeah, I started as a claims specialist. I became a senior claims specialist, eventually like an AVP and a claim manager, and then eventually head of their management liability claims group.
And, when you made the move over to go in-house to a carrier, like, did you then have, and I'm sure the answer is yes, it kind of changed your perspective on, I'm sure, on, you're lawyering and like kind of like things you may I just feel like you would reflect on, wait, I was doing this all along, but like, hey, now that I'm in-house, I understand like what the carrier needs or what that adjuster needs, and it kind of changes your mindset a little bit.
Yeah, I think that, you start to, it's just a different focus, right? Like you answer to so many different people, like when you, as a carrier, right, you have your obligations and your duties to your insured, right? The people who bought the product that your company sells and really is paying for the service, the claim service, right? Like that's what they're selling. They're selling your claim service and how you help them navigate this kind of trying time in their life as either a company or as an individual, as a director, as an officer, whatever it is. They bought this product from your company, and when they're in need, it's kind of your opportunity to help guide them and use your expertise and experience to help do that. I think that that you also have to deal with your internal and external business partners, and you have to deal with your senior stakeholders in claims. And they all, like, it's different messaging for each one, because they have different needs and different expectations, and they have to answer to different folks. And you have to learn how to navigate all those different conversations, which isn't an easy task for like really anyone, because the information, and you also got to work with defense counsel. So there's all these different folks that claims people have to deal with and interact with, and you have to make sure that you're sharing the proper information with them and that you're engaging them in the right way to try to bring everything in for like a soft landing, so to say.
Yeah. So is there anything, like, once you were in that role though, is there anything that you realized that maybe you were doing as outside counsel, or that your outside counsel was doing, that was very unhelpful, or like that you're like, man, I can't believe I was doing that all this time. Like, this is just not assisting the process, or something that you're like, I wish counsel understood better to make the process move more smoothly?
So I think there are a couple of things. I think when I was both doing insurance defense and coverage, there was like this, they love for us to write like big long reports and get those reports to the insured. That was kind of like, here's the whole claim, here's what's happening in the underlying litigation, here's our thoughts on coverage, here's our recommendation, here's our draft coverage letter. And what I've found is that like those big reports aren't terribly helpful. Like carrier representatives, they don't have a ton of time to sit down and read like a 15-page report. What they really need is, to help you have like, whether it's a coverage attorney who's advising you or counseling you, or insurance defense firm that's defending the insured. It's what happened, how did it happen, what's their story versus the other story, and what are our avenues for resolution, and what's it worth. And I don't think there are a lot of young attorneys who work at these firms that don't see things that way, and they don't always fully understand is that internally I have an obligation to post reserves within our financials to account for claims, and I need to be able to say, okay, well, this claim is potentially worth X or Y or Z, and I need to post a reserve based on that. And there needs to be an adequate time to do that. You can't call an insurance carrier a week before a mediation and say, hey, we're having a mediation, by the way, I think we need $10 million. You need to give your insurance carrier clients time to digest the information, ask the questions that they need to ask, So then we can have the internal conversations with our stakeholders to properly elevate things, prepare the company for this potential financial hit, and then be prepared for mediation so you can participate properly and adequately. And I think that sometimes insurance defense lawyers and even sometimes coverage lawyers don't appreciate or understand like that timing component. And the ones that do are very successful because they know what to get you, how to get it to you, and to kind of allow you to be successful with all those different people that you need to interact with.
Yeah, I find I see this a lot. Like I hear that complaint all the time. But I do feel like especially with younger attorneys, and maybe not always younger attorneys, any attorneys, they feel like, well, our worth is like what we put out there. So there's feels like there's this need to add extra information just because they're doing the work. And I think that's where those long reports come from, being like, well, I was at this deposition, I need to tell them everything that happened in the deposition. Whereas in reality, maybe you have a summary of the deposition in a separate document that you have all those nitty gritty details. And maybe you attach that to the email report that says the deposition went forward, the witness was bad, this is how it impacts us, and this is what changed, and this is what we're going to do next. And so the information can be there, but you don't necessarily have to clog all the pertinent information with the excess information.
And the funny thing, there are some people who still love those long reports, and they want to have that information at their fingertips to go look up stuff. And I can appreciate that. I had one of the partners I worked with at that firm, that coverage firm that I worked with for 3 years. She always wrote these amazing executive summaries before every report. And it was almost all right, I'm going to write this report and it's going to have everything you need, but I'm going to give you a 1 to 2 page lead in that's going to kind of distill it for you as, succinct and as specific as possible. So if you just had to read this, you would be fine. But the meat and potatoes are beyond it. And I thought that was a really good way to do it, because not everyone has time to kind of sift through a 15-page report, and it's having that 1 to 2 page kind of primer, that cliff notes, as maybe you would call it, to get to work with is kind of a critical
tool
thing to have if you're on the carrier side of things.
Yeah, I agree, and I hear that a lot too. There's a big wanted need for the executive summary, or at least a sum up, a sum up with critical points, and maybe let's not read the 15-page report. But there are some who like it there, and I think there's some attorneys who feel good about doing it. There's just some, I don't know, they just and I think the heart of it goes with the critical thinking. You're thinking everything through. So sometimes when you have to think everything through, it helps to get it all out there and see it. But I think it goes full circle to understanding the business side of insurance, and that it is lacking for a lot of practicing attorneys, because it's not, you don't learn it, you just learn it as you go through your career. And some people, there's some people who are just flat out litigators, and they're not getting involved in the business side. They just might be involved in the, they're going to court and their bootstraps on the ground, the depositions and this and all that, and they're not maybe not even be interested in the business side. So they're just there to grind, I guess. But you need someone to understand the business side.
No, I mean, it's a business, and to be able to communicate with your business partners, whether it be the underwriting business partners or your broker business partners, I mean, so critical for success of the insurance company and for the insureds and everyone you're dealing with. And being able to give information to your underwriters so they can, rather regularly, so they can adjust the way that they're doing business. Nothing worse than to not have information, and there's some type of trend in the marketplace and your underwriters are unaware of it, and they can't change how they're underwriting or how they're pricing products based on this change in the market. And to have those discussions with them and to kind of regularly update them is kind of critical, I think, for success internally at a carrier. And I think there are so many different ways to do business internally at a carrier. I think there's some places that claims is siloed and underwriting siloed, and the two don't talk. And then you have like the other extreme where it's like claims can't do anything without underwriting permission. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a good place in the middle that I'm regularly talking to my underwriters and supporting them and helping them navigate the waters that is writing insurance. And I'm sharing with them trends, I'm sharing with them information on claims, I'm allowing them to be informed and to make good decisions. But at the same time, I'm able to post reserves and resolve claims without fear of underwriting.
Yeah, which isn't a happy medium, I think.
Yeah, so, and I think it's just finding the right place to have that balance.
Yeah. So let's talk about where you are now, because what you're doing now is exciting. And when you and I spoke on the phone, you had you were really excited about this because it is a great opportunity where you're sitting, and I don't want to be on this podcast without talking about it. So because you were at a I think larger established carrier, and then you've moved on to a smaller but subsidiary of a larger carrier, so you kind of have this startup opportunity with some real backing from an established carrier. So I want you to talk about that and your experience with that move and kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah, so our parent company, Westfield, they're actually celebrating their 175th year. Yeah. So happy birthday, Westfield. And they've been around, established carrier. They're based out of Ohio. And in, I think it was 2021, they, I think they decided they wanted to branch out and, diversify and enter like the specialty business. And Jack Kuhn, who had worked at Axis, my old carrier, with me, many years ago, and he, June 2021, they started this organization, and with a goal of really introducing Westfield to the specialty insurance market. And they kind of focusing on 4 core areas: financial lines, cyber and pro, property, and casualty. And as they were kind of getting started up, I'd stay in touch with some folks that I knew had come over with Jack, and kind of said, hey, congratulations, looks like a really exciting opportunity. And then we just started talking, and I was able to meet our chief claim officer kind of in late 2021. And it just seemed really exciting, like what was happening here. It was the excitement of a startup with the support of a core, insurance company behind it that was interested in seeing us be successful. And, it wasn't being backed by private equity. It wasn't being backed by, something that wasn't insurance related, but there was this insurance carrier, and it seemed like a very exciting opportunity for me. And so I expressed interest and said, hey, look, if you're ever looking for a financial lines claims person, I would love to come over and, really kind of help you build that part of the organization. And in April of 2022, I left Axis to come to Westfield Specialty, and, really haven't looked back since. And it's been an amazing and special opportunity. And I feel like it doesn't come around in your career many times to have this type of opportunity. I think, for me, it just seemed like such a special and tremendous opportunity to join Westfield Specialty and kind of help build the claim organization, build the culture, kind of help support our chief claim officer in building the organization that she wants. Um, and we all come from other carriers with like really great experiences, and we know what we liked and what we didn't like, and we can build a claim system that we like from scratch. And so we can just do all these things that and try to avoid the limitations that we had in our other jobs.
Yeah.
And
And
so
it's
that's
almost,
really exciting.
yeah, it's almost like you're designing your perfect workplace and your perfect like um user experience for your insureds, and how you approach claims, and how like the processes that you use. So I mean it's incredible to get in on that early on and just be part of paving the path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
I think that
oh, go ahead.
it's just, it doesn't come along very often in one's career. And, for me, I was like, wow, this is something I really want to do. Um, and I think everyone who's kind of joined us, kind of feels very similar, that it's just such a unique and special opportunity. And, I kind of say this a lot here. I'm like, the job that I have today is very different than a job I'll have in a year. I'm almost kind of preparing for that job, which will be kind of more like my old job, in the sense of, you hit scale, you're handling claims, you're posting reserves, you're elevating things. But now it's just such a special and unique time, because you're building out the systems, you're talking about things, you're trying to develop like the best practices and how we're going to like interact and do business. And it's a really cool time, and we're able to kind of support our underwriters and kind of getting things off the ground and building their relationships with brokers, and showing that we're here to kind of support the products.
So what are there any particular things that you're doing differently or implementing differently, not to say anything negative about anywhere you used to work, but like, are there things that you're implementing differently here that is a change from some common protocols or procedures you used to have?
I mean, I think they're like little things. We're able, I think you have, when we were at older established carriers, there were things in the system, whether there are ways to identify claims, that you had to use other things, whether it be like a reserve signal or whatever, to make things, to kind of communicate with people. And now we can kind of build into the system that the things that we want and need, and to help us kind of support our underwriters and support our insureds, and to kind of interact with our internal stakeholders. And we're able to kind of say, can we do that in the system? Can we make this easier? Can we make this report that will give us the information we need? How can we get the data? Can we get the analytics from the system? And we're able to kind of build a system that will help us do that. And we get to think about those things. And you didn't always have that opportunity at other carriers, where they had systems that were already built when you joined. Or, I mean, I assume at some point in time something was new, but a lot of the systems are older, or at older established carriers, it's like, okay, well, I remember in my last carrier we had to build a new claim system, but it has to line up a little bit with the old system, and some certain things have to flow through, and there's certain things that people like that you had to do here, and so you have limitations there, and we don't have those limitations. We get to kind of build something with a vision of us being successful.
Yeah. And also the disruption of introducing a new system when you already have one intact, like that whole turn process of implementation is a painful one.
Yeah, I mean, having a legacy system and a new system is never easy, and it's always hard on adjusters who have to work out of both systems.
Yeah.
And you have to train people on two systems, and you get, well, when do I pull the stuff from the old system to the new one? Do I ever do that? And it's definitely a challenge. And yeah, so it's great to be able to be here at the beginning and kind of um, help set up the vision for the future and build a system that people will be happy to work with, right? And it's so critical.
And also that you're working on, building a team, and as you said, like it started that, there's people from all different, carriers all over, and they're bringing their own experiences in. So you have this opportunity to build this really strong team that is going to collaborate together for this joint vision, and there's something really special about that. Like you're kind of like, it's like you're coming to a camp for the first time and you're like, what do we want this camp to be? And let's all like take our individual experiences to make this the best camp possible.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I've hired my first person on my team, and she was a fantastic ad, and already so excited. She's contributing so much to what we're doing, and thoughts and ideas, and how to address things, and we're seeing that across the claim organization as we build our teams. Just different folks coming in with other ideas, and we're building something together. And I think everyone feels that like they're valued and that they're important. And our chief claim officer does just such a fantastic job in making everyone feel like kind of included, and sharing information, and funneling information down, which is such a stickler in some places. Is like the information doesn't always flow down. Like people get it and hold on to it and don't always share it. And I mean, we're having a lot of fun, and we're working hard, and we see where we want to go and how we want to get there. And it's just kind of putting everything in place to do it. And it's been a real thrilling and rewarding experience thus far. And I'm coming up in a couple months will be like my 1 year here, and it feels like really good to look back on it and say, wow, we've done so much, and we still have so much hard work to do.
Yeah, well, because I'm sure, because again, you have this mix of, a startup with, an established backing. So with a startup, whenever I speak with anyone who's at a startup, they're like, you just never know what's going to happen that day, and you kind of, there's a lot to learn. But one of the negatives I hear from a lot of startups is financial backing, and having to be not having a lot of that. And in your scenario, you have at least a established financial backing that might take some of those startup pains that I hear a lot away. Look, we're just about out of time, and we've covered so much, and you've been through so much in your career. I think so many different high points. And if you could like look back and give your younger self some advice, what advice would that be?
Geez, that's a great question. And I think it's be patient, be confident, never stay in a place too long beyond when you're feeling that it's not the right fit, and then to not try to leave a place just because you want maybe more money. That sometimes there's more to life than just that, and that having a great work environment with great people is a very unique and rewarding experience. And if you have that, to stay with it as long as you can. I think so many folks are just, I need to get a promotion, I need to get more money, I need this, I need that. And I think some of the best advice I can share with people is take your time, learn, build your brand, and try to speak to as many people as you can, and learn around you, and learn from people who've been there. Like try to find a mentor, engage with the people above you. If you're a claim specialist, talk to the AVPs, talk to the VPs, talk to your chief claim officer. Those folks love making time for pretty much anyone in the organization. They want your success is their success. And it's trying to remember that, like, yes, they have to manage an organization. Yes, they have to make tough decisions, but they want you to be successful because the entire organization is successful. And I think that being able to, I read the Multipliers book, and looking at people like kind of who look for those people to help make the people around them multiply and be better, and try to work with those people and seek them out and try to avoid the like diminishers out there. Like, and when you find one, be quick to say, okay, maybe this isn't the right fit, and look for another opportunity. Things can always be explained on a resume, and people understand and appreciate that, and they'll see it as maturity. If you're like, look, I went to a place and it wasn't the right fit, and I moved on to somewhere else to find success. And that's a very reasonable answer to get to people if you had a short stint somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for yourself, your younger self, and like that's a great advice that you can pass on to like your kids. I try to say a similar type thing to my kids too. Like, don't be with someone who's putting your light out. You want someone don't be someone who's going to blow out your flame. So I think that's great advice. Well, Aria, I really appreciate you taking, the time out of your morning. I know you said you had to 4:00. You do not.
No, I don't.
But
I've changed.
Things change. That's how this industry is. You go in one day with your to-do list, and it usually gets shot to shit by 10:00. So
yeah, no, life is unpredictable. But no, thank you. This was really exciting. I'm glad that you reached out, and I'm happy to be able to engage in this fantastic opportunity. And I looking forward to kind of going back and watching some of your prior podcasts. There are a lot of them, so it could take a while.
Yeah, it might. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I appreciate you taking the time. And for, again, our listeners out there, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to the Defense Never Rests on Apple Podcasts. And you can also find us on YouTube at TDNR Podcast. Thank you.